All right, welcome everyone. Some technical difficulties here. This is a presentation about caring for aging parents while parenting, particularly the sandwich generation. So those of us who are caring for young children as well as aging parents. I am Sarah Hudson. I am a clinician at RDU Therapy. I have about 15 years or so of experience in the mental health field. And I'm excited about this presentation. I think it's applicable in so many ways. I have experience both professionally and personally with being a member of the sandwich generation. And so today, I will be speaking with you about some practical, strategies, some tools, and some tips that I feel are helpful in managing the burnout and the stress of being in the sandwich generation. So this is not therapy. This is, really just a resource and a tool that hopefully will be helpful for those of you watching today. Um, I wanted to start off by sharing some statistics. I looked into some of the data about who exactly is in this generation. It seems to me that there are a lot of us, and doing some research, it did prove to be the case. So, the sandwich generation refers to adults who have a parent 65 or older and are either raising at least one child younger than 18 or providing financial support to an adult child. There are 23% of US adults are in this category, according to Pew Research from 2021. And those in their 40s are most likely to be in this generation. 54% of people in this age group have a parent older than 65 and a child or children younger than 18. And again, this is from Pew Research. And the Caregiver Action Network suggests that 60% of these caregivers are women. So there are a lot of us out there, and we are managing caregiving from all ages and all directions. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what exactly caregiving is. Caregiving is a lot of things. It requires action. It provides assistance and support. And it's the act of giving to another person who needs it for reasons of age, injury, illness, etc. So we are giving something to somebody else who needs it because they're not able to provide it for themselves. Sometimes this is financial, it can be administrative, medical, physical, or emotional domains. And I would actually suggest that it's all of those things at different times. And it's often unpaid. So, these can have feelings of burnout, stress, and exhaustion for those of us who are experiencing this caregiving duty. So, how do you know if you might be burned out from caregiving? First of all, let's talk about what that is. So, burnout is a state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion that happens while you're taking care of someone else. And that's according to the Cleveland Clinic. So, burnout can look like being fatigued, having anxiety, depression, changes in sleep patterns and appetite, mood changes such as increased irritability, anger, things that are maybe not typical for you in your day to day, an increase in anxiety, increase in depression. Um, those can be signs of burnout, and it's important to pay attention to these especially if you are a caregiver. So one way that I sort of organized and framed a way to prevent burnout was by an acronym that I came up with called BASES. So to prevent this burnout, cover your bases. And this just lists out what I'm going to go through each of these in more detail, but BASES stands for boundaries, advocacy, so advocacy for yourself and for others, safety, Physical safety could be emotional as well, but your safety as a caregiver and those that you are caring for. The E is for empathy or emotional awareness. The S is support and self-care. So these are things that I feel, based on my experience working with other people, are important things to consider when you are wanting to prevent burnout. So let's look first at what boundaries means. So boundaries, these are just some things to consider when you're thinking about boundaries. So boundaries are important because they can give you containment and clarity. It asks you to ask yourself, what are you willing to do in this moment? Um, they can shift. It's okay to say yes one day and no to the next, no the next day. So perhaps, you're able to drive a parent to an appointment one week, and then the next week it's really not possible because you have other things to do. So, just because someone asks you for something does not mean that you have to answer. So boundaries are set when you're able to reflect on yourself and on your needs, and then be willing and able to share those with others. So you may consider one thing that might be helpful when you're thinking about how to set a boundary is to consider having set times that you work on caregiver tasks. So, you may be in a position where you are working, you have a paid employment that you are paying attention to. You also may have partners or friends or other things that you need and want to take care of in your life. And you also have caregiver tasks coming at you. So there might be appointments that you need to make, phone calls you need to return, things that you need to physically do, people you need to visit. So consider, setting up your work week or, your monthly calendar with specific times where you dedicate, a certain number of hours to doing these caregiving things. Um, Another way to set a boundary is to put your phone on do not disturb or ignoring group text or email chains, particularly if, it might be a situation where someone that you're caring for has an illness that people, who care about this person want to know about, how are they out of the hospital yet? How are they doing? Um, they might be well-intentioned check-ins, and it might be a situation where, not responding all the time and at every ask is more effective for you in being able to pay attention to what you want to pay attention to in the moment. So that could be one way to set a boundary that it helps you to become more effective in your life. So boundaries look different and they can take shape in many different ways. So you may consider putting boundaries around tasks. So that might mean that you feel willing and able to help, with some administrative things, and maybe you're not willing and able to help with transportation, for example. Um, it could be with certain people. So, depending on the situation, family dynamics, or the specifics of your life and the people you're caregiving, there may be certain people that you feel you would like to set a boundary with. And by doing that, that will help you feel more like yourself and prevent some of the burnout that might come from having to interact with this particular person or people. A boundary could also be around time. So, sort of what I mentioned before, where, it really doesn't feel good to you to be working on caregiving tasks at 8 p.m. You want to spend time with your partner or exercising or, reading or doing something else that is also important to you. So maybe, scheduling certain times where you're dedicating these ta completing these tasks is effective for you. Similarly, putting boundaries around relationships. That can also help to prevent burnouts. If you have a relationship that is such that causes stress in a way that's not helpful to you, you may need to put some boundaries around that. Um, and also with communication. So again, not responding all the time to requests or to inquiries may help to keep some of this burnout at bay. So when I mention advocacy, the second A in BASES, advocacy takes many, many forms, and it can be both for yourself and for other people in your life, those that you're caregiving for example. And advocacy really is an opportunity for improvement and to ask for what you and or your dependent need. So it's a tool for prevention of escalation into crises. And what I mean by that is that if you are working with somebody, you're a caregiver for someone, and you're noticing that maybe there's, a systems issue at the facility, let's say that your parent is living in, you're not getting information or the ball is being dropped or, maybe there's a resource that your loved one would benefit from having and it doesn't exist. So pointing out these things, asking for what you need and for what would make things better for you and your loved one could prevent a crisis from happening. If you get them into the appointment that they need, maybe they won't be hospitalized. If they're able to get a medication, maybe they won't, their condition won't become worse. So advocacy, I feel, is super important, and it can also be very difficult at times. Another thing about advocacy is that it models um, behavior to the younger people in your life that you're caregiving for. And what I mean by that is that it shows how to ask for what you and your loved one need. It shows people, the younger generation, that, change can happen. Um, sort of the caregiving world, there are many gaps of resources, a lack of supports in many situations. And so it's a way to show, that these things are worth asking for. They're important and that, you can ask for changes to be made. So advocacy takes place in many different domains as well. So it may be advocating with your employer to, have a change in hours so that you can accompany your loved one to an appointment. It may be advocating, to be seen by a certain medical provider or to have certain tests run. It might also be advocating, with your partner or family members or other people in your life for things that would make the potential burden of caregiving easier for you. And so the result of that is that it can give you a sense of control and empowerment in this role as a caregiver because you're able to identify what it is that you need and then to be able to ask for it. You may or may not receive it. And yet the act of asking can make you feel very empowered and like you have some control in situations that often seem like there's not a lot of control. And again, modeling that to the younger generation can be super important as well. So then when we look at safety, the first S in BASES, safety also encompasses many different elements. And as we know, with aging parents, there can be many unsafe behaviors that happen. Elders are at risk for exploitation in many ways. So there are many financial scams out there, internet exploitation, and then of course, physically unsafe behaviors like driving, or if it's an elder that has dementia, for example, wandering, away from their home or their facility, those sorts of things. There can be a lot of safety issues that caregivers are paying attention to or required to intervene with. Um, just like parents, children also can be very unsafe. And so, one thing I think is important when you're in this caregiver role is to think about setting up guardrails. So, what are some safety guardrails that will help you feel like, within this system that you're in, there are some things in place that will make it safer. So examples of these would be the life alert systems that they have for older adults. You can conduct wellness checks if it's a situation where you're not physically living close to your aging parent and you have some concerns about their well-being. Calling local police and people like that to do wellness checks. And also thinking about the physical space that both, your elder and your younger child may be inhabiting, and what are some accommodations that you could make so that, if you're not there or, you won't lose sleep at night worrying about, sort of the physical space that these people, that your loved ones might be in, these people in your life. So another element of safety has to do with your responsibilities as a caregiver. So one thing I think is important to consider is knowing who is responsible for what with these caregiving issues. So there can be, and there are, many legal issues around who has access to certain information. This is not just with older adults, but with children as well. So who is responsible, who has access to certain information, who has decision-making power? And if it's not you, who is it? And getting to know that person, their role, being able to communicate with them is going to help, I feel, to have less stress around some of these issues. So there also are, a lot of financial things to consider um, as well as sort of things from the healthcare system. So things like advanced directives and power of attorneys. So if your aging parent, suddenly has a health issue and they need intervention from someone else, do you know where, do they have a power of attorney? Do you know where that is? If that's your role in your family system, you know, where is this information? Do you know how to access it? Do you know sort of who is responsible for this? Knowing this information, having it can help give you a peace of mind, can help you feel safe, can help your loved ones feel safe as well because there's a plan, and it can help decrease worry, which again can help ultimately with the goal, which is decreasing your potential for burnout. So moving on to E, empathy and emotional awareness. So, this is a very difficult age. In my experience, this stage of life, for my work with clients, is really, really hard. Sometimes it requires us to really dig deep, to be generous both to ourselves and to the people that we're caring for. Um, there's a lot of complex feelings that can come up as we're watching our parents age and also watching and helping our children, grow. Um, there can be really complicated relationship dynamics among family members, historical issues that pop up, when parents begin to age and, it's sort of a here we are type of moment. So, part of helping to prevent burnout is to, you know, having an awareness of, the feelings that are involved with this stage and with all the caregiver tasks. There's lots of feelings, it's normal. And if you're able to feel those feelings, and acknowledge them, then, perhaps that will make it easier. And, one thing also to consider is that this is part of the human experience. We all are cared for in some way, in some capacity over the course of our lives, beginning from birth. We are cared for, and also we care for others in some capacity. And so, being able to um, hold that and, all of the feelings that go along with that um, can help to prevent some of the burnout and to ease the burden of caregiving. All right, so getting to the S, support and self-care. So the good news is that there are things out there that can help. There are resources that are available for those of us in the sandwich generation, and not just the sandwich generation, but carers in general, that can help to help support caregiving. So there are caregiver support groups. I have found those to be sort of localized. It might take some effort to find them, but they do exist. So seeing if there's a caregiver support group in your area could be a resource for you to get some support around these issues. Um, Many hospitals and doctors' offices have social workers who either can, meet with you to offer some support or give you resources in your community. So they're a really great really great staff to reach out to. Um, Senior centers and councils on aging, depending on where you live, have different levels of resources, but they can be great both to provide some of the extra care that your parents, your elder may need, you know, physically, or, if you need to spend time doing something else, your loved one could be there. They also often have other resources that you can take advantage of in your community. Another way that you can get support and self-care is by trying to outsource tasks when it's possible. So, if you need to spend time with your kids and your parent also needs you at the same time, who in your life can help with some of these things? Do you have a sibling? Do you have a family friend, who can support you, with taking on some of these tasks? Maybe, you have a sibling who's really good with financial management. They can take on the finances, and you're really good with and comfortable, tackling the healthcare system. So division of labor can be really helpful. Shifting duties to others and recruiting helpful family and friends. So, what's in your domain, given the situation that you're in, given, the day, the hour, your life in that moment. So this one, finding moments of joy. As I've mentioned, like earlier and sort of all throughout this presentation, this is a really difficult time. It can be really hard to balance all of the different demands of caregiving for a wide range of ages and, manage all the things in your life. So, finding those moments of joy. Maybe there's something funny that happens while you're waiting in line, waiting in the doctor's office. If you have a parent that has, some cognitive decline or some memory issues and they're telling some funny stories, maybe just spending the time and finding that happiness will help. Watching your kids, play outside with them or, laughing with them. These little moments of joy can make a big difference in the overall feelings of being overwhelmed or burned out that can happen when we're caregivers. And speaking with a mental health professional. So there are many mental health professionals out there who are also members of the sandwich generation themselves or have experience with working with caregivers. And it can be really helpful even just to, talk about it and find other people that are able to relate to what's going on with you and offer some support and validation. All right, so we've come to the end of our talk. If anyone has questions, feel free to reach out to me. Um, my contact information is on the slide. Again, my name is Sarah Hudson. I am a therapist, a provider at RDU Therapy. Um, we welcome inquiries, any questions that you have. If you want to schedule anything with me, available for that as well. You can also reach out to Leah. She is our admin person. Her contact information is intake@rdutherapy.com. You can find us on the interwebs, website, Facebook, Instagram, all those things. We also